Welcome, weary traveler of thought and time, to another quiet tale told not for thrill, but for stillness, for sleep, for slowness, for sinking deep into the sand-soft rhythms of a long-forgotten world. Before we begin, if these slow stories help you rest, consider subscribing so we may continue to wander gently through history together. Now, let your body settle. Breathe as if the night were heavy with old silence, and picture this. Far across the sun-blasted plains of ancient Arabia, before the memory of borders or empires, there lay a village carved not with tools, but with patience, worn into the land like footprints smoothed over by centuries of wind. This village, not marked on any modern map, was not known for war or wealth or wisdom. It was known simply as the place where people waited for rain. Imagine waking to the same muted ochre glow each day, where the air feels heavy with heat, but absent of promise, where every movement is drawn out, like the long notes of a reed flute, and every thought turns again to the clouds that never come. The people here do not rush. Why would they? The goats chew slowly. The clay pots dry slowly. The bread rises slowly, if it rises at all. Every footstep presses into dust that has not known moisture in 3 seasons. You are among them now. Perhaps the son of a date farmer or the daughter of a water keeper, and your day begins not with action, but with observation. You walk to the edge of the village, where the cracked stone basin sits, once used to collect rain, but now filled with wind-blown seeds, feathers, and tiny bones. You squat beside it and stare into its hollow center, wondering, like your ancestors, whether this will be the year the sky changes color. Behind you, the village stretches with sleepy simplicity. Low square homes of sun-dried mud brick, palm frond awnings flapping lazily in the breeze that offers no relief. A child hums as she draws circles in the dirt with a twig. An old man grinds dried herbs into powder with a rhythm that seems older than language. A dog lies belly up in the shade, blinking at nothing. There is no urgency, only repetition. At the central tent, stitched from camel hide and patched with older memories, a group of elders sits in silence, watching the horizon like priests of stillness. One raises a hand not to speak, but to adjust his robe, and even that gesture feels ceremonial. In this place, every small act becomes sacred by virtue of how little there is to do. You return home at midday, your sandals powdered with dust, your lips dry, but not cracking, your eyes squinting toward a cloud that might be more illusion than hope. Your mother greets you without words, handing you a bowl of water the color of honey, filtered through cloth and patience. You drink slowly. Everything is slow here. The heat presses against the canvas roof like a sleeping beast. A fly buzzes in aimless loops near your ear. Somewhere, someone begins to play a one-string rababa, its thin voice wavering in the afternoon haze. You lie down beside the doorway, where the breeze might find you, eyes half-lidded, ears full of stillness. It's in this slowness that the spirit of the village survives, not in triumph or change, but in the ritual of waiting. Waiting not just for rain, but for any change at all. The kind of waiting that becomes a way of life, until even The thunderless sky feels like a companion, and as your breath deepens, matching the soft rhythm of a world unmoved, your thoughts drift like sand over the dunes, shifting slowly, silently, toward sleep as the quiet afternoon presses on with the same patient weight it always carries. You find yourself beneath the shade of an acacia tree that leans ever so slightly eastward, as though even the tree has grown weary of hoping for rain and instead leans toward the distant dunes where the wind hums its slow, wordless songs. The ground beneath you is hard and cracked in places, soft in others where the sand has gathered like forgotten stories, and you sit cross-legged, not out of custom, but because there is no reason to stand. Around you, the world moves in near silence, only the rustle of a linen cloth drying on a thorn bush, the occasional bray of a distant donkey, or the faint clink of pottery as someone inside a nearby hut stirs date syrup over a clay hearth. The air is not hot in the burning way of midday fire, but hot in the way of a memory, thick, timeless, and slow to change. A group of young boys kicks a ragged goatskin ball in the dust, their laughter lazy and spaced far between, their energy as rationed as the water kept under the floorboards of each home. Your grandmother's voice echoes in your mind, reminding you that each drop saved is a drop that might mean survival, not just of thirst, but of the soul. You watch the boys for a while, then shift your gaze to the ridgeline, where the shepherds often appear in the late hours, leading goats that move like ghosts along the slope. Today, there are no shepherds yet, only the shimmer of heat rising in vertical waves that make the rocks dance like spirits. A bee buzzes near your knee, and you do not swat it away. No one wastes energy on reaction here, unless it truly matters. Life in this village is lived in a series of gentle acknowledgments, a nod, a pause, a sip, a sigh. A soft breeze brushes your cheek, lifting a few grains of sand which settle into the creases of your robe, like they were always meant to be there. From one of the homes, a woman begins to chant, low, repetitive, something between a lullaby and a prayer. You do not know the words, and it doesn't matter. The sound weaves through the air, a thread connecting every corner of this sun-bleached place. You close your eyes and listen. Time becomes soft, like dough left to rise on a stone shelf. Somewhere to your left, the village waterkeeper checks the clay seals on the amphorae stored beneath her house. She does this every day. It's not about finding something new. It's about maintaining the old. This is not a place that prizes change. Change comes in storms, and storms haven't come in years. What's prized is rhythm, the kind of rhythm that lulls the heart into forgetting it. Once beat quickly, you lean back on your elbows, watching as the sun tilts lower in the sky, not fast, not slow, but with the same certainty that everything here carries. Shadows lengthen and stretch toward the well, where the bucket rope has frayed from years of fingers pulling it slowly, patiently, in hopes of just a few more gulps of the underground supply. Evening approaches like it always does, unannounced but not unwelcome. Fires are lit without ceremony, and a few small clay lamps are filled with precious oil pressed from desert seeds. Their flames dance low and soft, more for comfort than illumination. You rise and walk home, tracing a path your bare feet have memorized. Inside, your father sharpens a blade, not for defense, but for trimming reeds to repair baskets. Your mother crushes dried figs into a mash to be eaten with flatbread that tastes of smoke and age. You take a bite without comment, chewing slowly, your jaw moving in time with the crickets that have begun to chirp just beyond the walls. Tonight, there will be no gathering, no storytelling, no questions of tomorrow. The only tale that matters is the one told by the sky. And tonight, as always, it tells the same story. Still no rain, still no change, and yet somehow everything feels full. Full of dust and silence and small, precious acts repeated without fanfare. As you lie down on the mat near the wall, the breeze slips through the slit in the door and brushes your cheek like a mother's hand, and your last thought before sleep is not a question, but a simple, tired truth. Waiting is a kind of life, too. Morning arrives without drama, as it always does here. There is no rooster crowing, no sudden flood of light through shuttered windows, just a slow softening of shadows and the delicate unwinding of the night's quiet. The breeze carries the faintest chill, a whisper of cool that lingers only for a few breaths before the rising sun begins to warm the mud brick walls and the stone-paved paths between homes, loosening the night's grip. You awaken not from an alarm but from the rhythm of habit, from the muffled sounds of movement as the village stirs into its familiar rituals. You sit up slowly on your woven mat, brushing a few grains of sand from your hair, and reach for the clay jug at your side. The water inside is warm already, and you sip it in small mouthfuls, letting the liquid settle into your body like a blessing. Across the room, your younger brother is still asleep, one arm thrown over his eyes, a shallow breath rising and falling in peaceful repetition. You do not wake him. Instead, you wrap yourself in your long robe and step outside, blinking into the pale gold of a fresh desert morning. The sky is endless, as if the heavens forgot where they stopped and the earth began. And though you search it instinctively, there are no clouds, not even a wisp, not even a smudge. You walk quietly through the village, past women sweeping dust into smaller piles, past an old man boiling camel milk with crushed herbs to ease his cough, past a child who crouches near an anthill and whispers to the creatures like they are gods. There is no rush to any movement, and even greetings are offered with a nod or a hand placed over the heart rather than spoken aloud. Near the edge of the village, a group of men gathers beneath the tamarisk tree to inspect a broken yoke, not because it is urgently needed, but because it gives them something to do. You pause to listen as they debate whether the wood can be mended or must be replaced, though no one has any fresh timber. It doesn't matter. The talking is the task, not the fixing. You leave them to it and continue toward the edge of the date grove, where rows of palms stretch in dusty lines toward the far-off ridges. The fruit is sparse this season, and what little hangs from the trees is dry and tough, but it will be harvested all the same. You reach the shaded hut, where the grove's caretaker, a wrinkled woman with eyes like sun-polished stones, is sorting fallen dates by hand. She nods without looking up, and you sit beside her, quietly joining the task. Hours pass this way, marked not by clocks, but by the shifting of light on sand, the slight change in shadow angles, the sound of a distant camel snorting somewhere beyond view. At midday, you return home and share a meal of lentils, hard bread, and a soft paste of fermented goat cheese. No one speaks as you eat. Words are not needed when the food is known, when the taste is the same as it has always been. After the meal, your father takes his tools and heads out to repair the fence that keeps the wind from scattering the herb garden, and your mother climbs onto the roof to brush away the dust that's gathered since yesterday. You sit by the threshold with a needle and torn sandal, slowly threading twine through old leather, not because the sandal is worth saving, but because everything is worth trying to save. The heat builds again in the afternoon, thick and weighty, and a dog pants in the shadow of a crumbling wall, tongue lolling, tail thumping once every few minutes in slow contentment. Far off, a group of travelers appears as specks on the horizon. Traders, perhaps, or pilgrims seeking the old shrine near the mountain bend. They'll pass through quietly, maybe trade for salt or dried herbs, maybe sleep under the stars and leave before dawn. The village prepares nothing for them, for guests are rare, but not surprising. You listen as your grandmother tells your younger siblings the story of the rain that came when she was a girl, when water fell for 3 days and turned the paths to rivers, when the sky was so dark it felt like night during midday. Her voice is soft, distant, barely louder than the wind, and yet every ear leans toward her, hungry for the sound of remembered miracles. The sun begins to set as slowly as it rose, casting long amber streaks across the land, and the scent of burning wood drifts through the air as small fires are kindled once more. You find yourself walking again, this time toward the quiet hills, where a few stubborn bushes cling to life, and you sit there alone for a while, watching as the stars begin to blink open one by one. There is no sudden revelation, no sign of rain, no divine message carved into the sky, just the steady breathing of the earth beneath you and the silence that wraps around your limbs like a thick woolen cloak. And in that silence, there is a kind of peace, the kind that belongs only to those who have made peace with waiting. When you finally rise and return home, the lamps are low and the world feels softer. You lie down without speaking, and sleep comes not like a storm, but like a slow, drifting fog, wrapping gently around you until even the dust in your lungs forgets the taste of thirst. The next day begins with a hush so deep it almost feels sacred, a stillness broken only by the occasional creak of woven door screens and the soft crunch of sand beneath bare feet, as villagers rise, not because the day demands it, but because their bodies have learned the rhythm of light. You wake slowly, as one does when nothing awaits them urgently, and stretch your limbs beneath a thin woolen cloth woven by your aunt seasons ago. Its once bright dye now faded by years of sunlight and dust. The air carries a trace of morning, cool, but it vanishes quickly as the sun climbs steadily, without drama or spectacle, into a sky that offers nothing new. No clouds again, but that is no surprise. No one says it aloud, Yet everyone looks upward at least once a day, not out of expectation, but out of habit, as if to quietly remind themselves that the sky is still beyond their control. You step outside and inhale deeply, catching the earthy scent of warming clay, dry palms, and faint ash from last night's cooking fires. The neighbors are already out, not working exactly, but moving with purpose all the same, sweeping the steps, patting flatbread, dough into circles, untying goats from their sleeping posts. A boy runs past, clutching a wooden hoop, and you hear the scolding voice of his older sister behind him, more out of ritual than anger. Nearby, the town's storyteller, an old man with eyebrows like broken feathers, sits cross-legged on a low bench, polishing a gourd that he uses as a drum. He doesn't speak unless spoken to, and even then his answers are slow, tangled in metaphor, often drifting into recollections that leave listeners unsure whether he was answering the question or merely sharing another fragment of the village's memory. You sit across from him for a while, neither of you speaking, simply watching as the shadows shift and stretch across the dusty courtyard. Eventually, he begins to hum a low, unhurried tune that seems to have no beginning or end, like something the wind would sing if it had a voice. You feel your body sway slightly in response, your thoughts softening at the edges, your breath matching the slow rhythm of the gourd's tapping. Later, you find yourself walking to the edge of the fields with a small woven basket over your arm, tasked with collecting dried grasses and wild seeds for the evening stew. It is not a harvest in the usual sense. Nothing lush or green grows here now, but there are still traces of nourishment if you know where to look. Kneeling beside a cracked stretch of earth, you sift through dry stalks and brittle leaves, picking out anything that still carries scent or color. And in this quiet labor, there is a kind of meditation, a merging of hand and soil and silence. A few feet away, an old woman is gathering prickly pear pads with practiced hands, her fingers wrapped in cloth to avoid the spines. You exchange nods and go back to your task. Time drifts by unnoticed. By the time you return home, the sun is leaning westward, and the light has turned a pale, dusty gold. Inside, the fire is already lit, and the scent of boiling lentils fills the air. You hand over your basket and sit near the hearth, watching the flames flicker against the clay walls, casting shadows that look like moving stories. Your mother does not ask what you found. She simply takes it, adds it to the pot, and stirs. That is the way of things here. No need to speak what is already understood. Dinner is served as it always is, in silence, with each person scooping their portion with pieces of bread, dipping slowly, chewing deliberately. Afterward, you step out into the night and sit on the low wall that rings the central square. A breeze moves through, warm and gentle, carrying with it the distant bleating of a goat and the soft clicking of wind chimes fashioned from old shell fragments. Above, the stars appear like they always do, clear and uncaring, each one sharp as a pinprick in the deep, dark cloth of the sky. An elder begins to recite a prayer, not loudly, not as a command to heaven, but as a lullaby spoken to the ground. You close your eyes, letting the sound wash over you, feeling your heartbeat slow, Your breath soften, your limbs sink into the rhythm of night. In a world where nothing changes quickly, where days blend into one another like grains of sand swept into a bowl, this too is a kind of comfort, a life not of movement, but of presence. You lie down on your mat beneath the open sky, arms behind, your head listening not for answers, but simply for the shape of the silence. And in that silence, in that dry, warm, unhurried hush, sleep comes to claim you not as a thief, but as a friend, and you drift away into the waiting once more. The morning sun does not rise with any ceremony. It simply appears, quiet and inevitable, as it always does, climbing steadily over the low ridges to bathe the village in that same soft light it has offered for as long as anyone can remember, light that casts long, lean shadows and warms the clay walls with a slow persistence that never rushes. You awaken not from noise, but from the gentle shift in temperature, from the feel of light pressing through the woven curtain that hangs loosely across the doorway. There is no need for alarm, no need for decisions. Today will unfold like all the others, quiet, slow, and filled with the small rituals that shape the rhythm of this place. You rise, brush the dust from your arms, and tie your robe with the same piece of frayed rope you've used for months, maybe years. Outside, the air is dry and still, with the faintest scent of old smoke and worn leather. A few neighbors are already up. A woman sweeping the path with a bundle of date palm fronds tied at the base. An elder sitting on a flat rock rubbing oil into his cracked heels. And two boys arguing softly over a game drawn in the dirt with lines and pebbles. You step past them, nodding without words, your feet moving toward the central square where today's task awaits. Not one of urgency or profit, but of maintenance and memory. You're helping to clear the ancient water channels, the narrow stone grooves dug generations ago that once guided rainwater from the hills into the heart of the village. Though dry for years now, the channels are still kept clean, as if the act of readiness alone might call the clouds back. You kneel beside a stretch of it near the eastern edge of the village, using a flat wooden scoop to lift out drifted sand and dead leaves. And each movement is slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. A man joins you, quiet, older, one of the few who remembers the last true flood, and he says nothing as he takes his place beside you, his scoop moving in rhythm with yours. Two shadows shifting slowly over stone. Birds call softly from the trees, sparrows mostly, though once in a while a desert lark appears, singing with surprising cheer. A dog wanders past, sniffs at your basket, then settles nearby, yawning widely before curling into a patch of shade. The hours pass unnoticed. A woman brings a jug of water and places it between you without a word, and you drink from the ladle, one after the other, careful not to spill, careful not to waste. The sun climbs higher, and the wind picks up slightly, just enough to stir your hair and make the palm fronds above whisper in their dry language. Eventually, the work is done, not finished, just done for the day, and you sit back, brushing dust from your knees, staring at the channel you've just cleared. It stretches into the distance like a memory, like a promise no one quite believes. in any more, but still honors. You walk home slowly, feeling the weight of the sun on your back and the soft crunch of earth beneath your sandals. Inside, your mother is mending a torn shawl, her fingers moving methodically through familiar stitches. She glances at you, sees the dust, the sweat, and says nothing. She doesn't need to. She pats the floor beside her, and you sit, watching her work. A pot bubbles over the small fire, giving off the sharp, earthy smell of lentils and dried herbs. Your brother enters moments later, arms filled with thorn branches for the fire, his face flushed with sun. The day continues, without pause, without change, each part sliding gently into the next, like beads on a string. You eat together, in quiet. Dip bread into stew, sip water that's been strained and stored in cool clay, and then rise for the evening's walk. It's not tradition exactly, no one has named it, but many villagers step out around dusk, walking the narrow paths between homes or sitting on flat rocks beyond the fence lines, watching the sun go down, as if it might change its mind and bring rain instead of retreat. You walk to the same hill as the night before and sit in the same spot, knees drawn up, arms resting on them, eyes fixed on the sky. There are no clouds. There are rarely clouds. But still, you look. Around you, others sit too, some alone, some in pairs, none speaking. It's not sadness that holds you here. It's not hope either. It's something quieter than both. A kind of loyalty to the act of waiting, to the land, to the old idea that rain will come not because it must, but because it always has, eventually. The stars begin to show, and the first calls to prayer echo softly across the village, not loud enough to stir the animals, but clear enough to mark the close of day. You return home in darkness, your feet knowing the path, even when your eyes don't. You lie down once more beside your brother, who's already breathing slow and deep, and you stare at the ceiling for a while, listening to the crackle of the last embers in the fire pit. You don't pray for rain. You don't speak. You simply exist in the quiet patience that ties one day to the next, like threads in a robe. And sleep finds you, as it always does, not suddenly, not forcefully, but gradually, gently, like a hand resting lightly on your shoulder, guiding you into another night beneath the rainless stars. The wind begins before the sun rises, whispering across the sands with a voice too soft to wake anyone but strong enough to stir the first loose grains of dust into small, swirling dances along the edge of the paths. You do not wake because of the sound. The wind here is never loud, but because your body has grown used to the rhythm of the land, to the subtle shifts in air and light that mark the passing of one day into the next. You open your eyes slowly, blinking against the growing pale light that seeps through the cracks in the clay walls, and lie still for a while, listening to the silence between the soft creaks of the wooden beams overhead. The house is quiet. Your brother turns once in his sleep, but does not wake. And beyond the walls, the village still slumbers in that sacred early hush. Rising without hurry, you wrap your robe around yourself and step outside, barefoot, your soles thickened by years of walking the same paths. The morning is cooler than usual, the breeze carrying with it the faint scent of faraway sagebrush and old stone. A few crows circle overhead, black flecks against a pale orange sky. There is something almost sacred about these early hours, when the world feels paused, like a held breath. You walk slowly toward the well, not to draw water, but simply because it's a place where people often go when they want to think or to not think. The stones around its base are worn smooth from generations of hands, and the old pulley creaks faintly in the wind. You sit beside it, resting your arms on your knees, letting the wind tug gently at your robe. Far off, the dunes shimmer in a soft, golden haze, their curves ancient and unmoved by any human worry. You wonder how long the sands have sat there, waiting for something too. An elder joins you, his footsteps barely louder than the breeze, and without greeting, he sits beside you. The silence is not uncomfortable. In this village, silence is as valuable as water, used carefully, respected deeply. Eventually, the elder speaks, his voice dry and low, telling a story about a year when the rains came, suddenly, pounding the earth so fiercely that the channels overflowed and the goats refused to leave their pens. You've heard this story before. Everyone has. But it's the kind of story people tell again and again, not to inform, but to remind. After a while, he falls quiet, and you both sit watching the horizon, where the sky meets the land, with no clear line between them. The sun rises fully now, and the heat begins to return, not harsh yet, but steady. The breeze fades. You both stand without a word, and the elder walks off toward the east fields while you head back home. On the way, you pass a small gathering of women grinding flour on wide flat stones, their hands moving in slow, circular patterns that seem like a kind of music. Children chase each other through narrow lanes, their feet kicking up little clouds of dust that sparkle briefly in the morning light before falling still. At home, your mother is boiling water in a deep clay pot, steam rising in lazy spirals. She hands you a bowl of softened figs mixed with flatbread crumbs and goat's milk. You eat slowly, savoring the texture more than the taste, your eyes half-lidded as you watch the steam curl upward. Later, you help your father repair the cracked edge of a storage jar, using resin and patience, pressing the pieces together as he hums a tune older than either of you. The hours pass, not with events, but with gestures, patching, sweeping, carrying, resting. In the afternoon, you help gather thorn branches for fuel, the brittle twigs snapping beneath your fingers, their scent sharp and dry. The sun is high now, and everything around you glows with that quiet, golden intensity only the desert knows. The light somehow both comforting and endless. As evening approaches, the village begins its slow shift into dusk. Fires are lit, mats are laid out, and old songs are hummed under breath as people settle into their corners. You carry a basket of dry herbs to the communal pot at the center of the village, where a stew has been bubbling since midday. Each family contributes something: dried roots, seeds, scraps of meat, so that no one goes without. You sit nearby as it cooks, watching the steam rise in long spirals, and listen to the soft chatter of voices around you, none of them hurried, none of them loud. After the meal, you return home, and lie beneath the stars once more, the air cool against your skin, your eyes tracing the constellations you've known since childhood. There is no sign of rain, no whisper of it on the wind, but somehow that doesn't feel like a loss. The waiting is not a punishment, it is simply the way of things. And as your breath deepens and your muscles release the quiet tension of another long, slow day, you feel yourself drifting not into sleep exactly, but into a kind of gentle pause, like dust settling after a breeze, soft and silent and complete. The morning begins not with sunlight, but with shadow, the kind of soft, gray dimness that comes just before dawn fully breaks, when the world is neither night nor day, and time feels stretched thin like worn cloth. You wake with your eyes still half closed, not startled, not rushed, but with the same slow unfolding of consciousness that the entire village seems to share. There is no urgency, no list to follow, just a vague knowing that the day has begun again, just like all the days before. You sit up and listen. There's a sound of grinding from across the courtyard, likely your aunt working the millstone, her hands already powdered with flour before most have risen. A dog barks once and then falls quiet. Somewhere, a clay jug clinks as it's lifted from a shelf. These are the only sounds that greet the new day, and they arrive like soft reminders rather than interruptions. You stand, stretch your back until it pops faintly, and step into your sandals, worn smooth by sand and years. Outside, the air is cool in that brief hour before the sun reasserts itself. The sky overhead is a blank dome of pale blue, without so much as a streak of cloud to break its stillness. You walk down the main path, your fingers trailing along the wall of the bakery, where the first flatbreads of the day are already baking on heated stones. The smell is warm and yeasty and familiar, and you nod silently at the baker, who doesn't speak, but acknowledges you with a tilt of his chin. You continue toward the far edge of the village, where the fields begin, the same fields your grandfather once worked, and his father before him, though now they yield little more than dry herbs, wild onion, and wiry stalks that manage to survive the arid breath of the land. Today, your task is to help carry composted ash from the cooking fires to spread at the base of the scrubby bushes and shallow-rooted plants. Not because it will bring miracles, but because tending to the earth is part of the rhythm, and the rhythm is everything. The baskets are light but awkward, and the walk is long enough for your feet to ache by the time you reach the edge of the far plot. You work in silence alongside two others, one a cousin who rarely speaks, the other a stooped old man whose memory sometimes loops in circles, but whose hands still know the land. You tip the ash in slow arcs, darkening the roots of thorny shrubs that poke up stubbornly from the cracked soil. A few birds hop nearby, pecking curiously at the scatter. Time folds itself neatly into the heat. There is no clock to measure these hours, only the curve of the sun and the changing song of the wind. When the baskets are empty, you sit beneath a fig tree whose leaves tremble gently in the breeze and share a handful of dates and hard cheese wrapped in waxed cloth. The meal is dry and simple, but your mouth welcomes it, and the cool water from the goatskin pouch that follows tastes like a gift even though it is rationed carefully. As the sun climbs higher, you begin the walk back, your shadows now shorter, the breeze having faded into stillness. The village is quieter now, most of its people tucked inside their homes, resting in the shade or working in stillness behind thick walls. You pass a woman dyeing fabric in shallow bowls, the cloth laid out to dry, in long rows like sleeping serpents. The colors are muted, mostly ochre, rust, and pale green, tones that match the world around you, sun-soft and dust-kissed. At home, you help your mother mix grain paste for the evening meal, your hands sticky as you knead the dough into small rounds, flattening them onto heated stones that hiss gently under the pressure. Your father sharpens a sickle that hasn't been used in months, its blade not dull, but weary. He says little, and you don't interrupt. In the late afternoon, after the food is prepared and the chores have been seen to, the family gathers in the courtyard, shaded by stretched canvas, where your grandmother tells a story. It's an old one, about the first spring, after the last long drought, when the rain came, in the night like soft drumming on the roof, and everyone woke, thinking it was a dream. Her voice is steady, the story told, not with excitement, but with reverence, as if each word were a prayer. The children lean in, wide-eyed, though they've heard it dozens of times. No one tires of the rain stories. As dusk drapes itself over the village, fires are lit again, their smoke rising in thin columns that twist against the dimming sky. You eat by lantern light, your food warm and simple, and after the meal, you step outside to watch the stars return. They blink into existence gradually, filling the sky with quiet certainty. You lie back on a woven mat, the earth still warm beneath you, the air now cool and dry, and you let the weight of the day melt away. You don't wonder about tomorrow. Don't worry about clouds or crops or time. The stars above have watched this village wait for centuries, and tonight they watch you too, silent, steady, ancient companions to those who know how to live without rushing. And as your breathing slows and your eyes grow heavy, you sink once again into the stillness, into the waiting, into the peace that comes from knowing that some things, even rain, are worth waiting lifetimes for. The village awoke beneath a windless sky that looked like it had been carved from stone, solid, unmoving, and without promise. And yet no one seemed troubled by this, because in a place where hope is carried, like water in clay jars, slowly and with both hands, people learn not to expect but simply to endure. You rose with the others, not because something stirred you urgently, but because the patterns of life here have a way of lifting even the heaviest sleepers, gently and without noise. The morning air was cool but dry, holding only the faintest trace of last night's cooking fires and the soft scent of goat dung that drifted lazily from the pens. You stepped outside to see your uncle already working the mortar, pounding dried herbs into powders with a rhythm that hadn't changed in years. 3 strikes, then a pause, then 3 again, as if he were tapping out a message to the dust. The sound echoed slightly against the clay walls, blending with the clatter of pots and the muted murmurs of women preparing the morning meal. Today was not a feast day, nor a market day, nor even a day to mark the moon. It was simply a day of small tasks, and that was enough. You were sent to the upper ledge with a woven basket tied around your back, tasked with gathering the fallen seed pods of the acacia trees, which would be ground into flour later that week. The path was narrow and edged with stones so dry they crumbled under your feet, and the climb was slow. But the stillness of the morning made every step feel like part of something sacred. Reaching the grove, you began your work in silence, crouching beneath thorny branches, plucking the brittle pods from the ground one by one, brushing off sand and ants, and dropping them into the basket with quiet care. A few lizards scurried out of your way, their tiny claws scratching over rocks, and a falcon circled high above, casting a brief, dark shadow across your hands before vanishing again into the sky that never seemed to move. Far below, the village looked like a handful of stones scattered in a shallow bowl, its people moving like thoughts through an old mind. The sun climbed slowly, but the heat did not press harshly yet, and you worked until the basket was full, until your back ached just enough to signal it was time to return. The descent was steadier, your legs remembering the way on their own, and when you reached the foot of the hill, you were greeted by the low bark of a dog and the sudden gust of wind that kicked up a swirl of dust before disappearing just as quickly as it had come. At home, your mother took the basket with a small nod, and you were handed a bowl of cold goat milk and a handful of roasted chickpeas. You sat near the doorway to eat, watching the sky, watching your neighbors, watching nothing in particular. The rest of the day passed in rhythms too subtle to name, helping your cousin repair the strap on a worn sandal, carrying firewood in bundles wrapped with rope made from palm fiber, sitting quietly with your grandfather as he trimmed the edges of his old prayer mat. In the late afternoon, the sky darkened, not with clouds, but with that particular dimness that comes before the sun begins to set, when every object casts a longer shadow and the air grows thicker with stillness. You joined the others in preparing the evening meal, steeping dried leaves in boiling water, adding thin slices of preserved lemon to a pot of millet porridge, grinding salt between flat stones. Each movement was deliberate, each step carried out without waste. At dusk, the call to prayer rose from the eastern corner of the village, not as a command, but as a gentle invitation, and people moved slowly toward the sound, forming rows not by instruction but by memory. Afterward, there was quiet again, the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty, but full of listening. You sat beside your father and listened as he recited lines from old verses etched into his mind during a youth spent under even drier skies. His voice was low, almost lost in the rustling of palm fronds swaying overhead. The stars appeared one by one, as they always did, patient and indifferent, and you looked up at them without expectation. There were no clouds. There hadn't been any in months, but the villagers still looked skyward each night, not because they believed, but because they belonged to a people who waited, and in that waiting, they found shape and meaning and peace. Later, you lay on your mat, your limbs stretched long, your muscles relaxed, your breath shallow and steady. The night air cooled your skin, and somewhere nearby, a donkey shifted in its stall, the soft creak of wood and rope fading into the deeper sounds of sleep. And as your eyes closed, you felt the day fall away behind you, not like a closing door, but like sand spilling from an open hand, light, quiet, and always returning to stillness. The morning of the 9th day begins not with brightness or birdsong, but with a deeper stillness than usual, as if the land itself has decided to remain motionless a little longer, and even the wind has tucked itself away in some distant canyon to rest. You wake slowly, not startled, but gradually, emerging from sleep like a canoe gliding from fog into a motionless lake, your mind silent, your breath easy. Around you, the village still sleeps or stirs in whispers. Faint shuffling from the neighboring room suggests your sister is already up, perhaps folding the same robe she folds every day, smoothing the creases, not for neatness, but for the quiet ritual it provides. You rise without sound and step outside into a world that feels paused. The air is heavy, not with rain, but with still warmth, and you instinctively glance upward, your eyes searching the sky for anything unfamiliar, any streak, any shade, any pulse. But it is the same, wide, pale, and vast beyond comprehension. The sand beneath your feet is fine and cool, having released the night's borrowed chill. And as you walk toward the central square, you pass a goat tied loosely to a post, chewing slowly and blinking at nothing in particular, living entirely in the moment as all animals here do. In the square, you find a small gathering of elders sitting on low stools, their backs curved like ancient trees shaped by wind and time, speaking in hushed tones about nothing that needs to be solved, only remembered. One is recounting a tale of the moon turning red one summer. Another speaks of a dream in which rain came through the fingers of a woman standing in the dunes. And the others nod slowly, not to agree or dispute, but to hold the story in place. You sit near them, but not among them, close enough to listen, but not so close as to disrupt the balance of their silence. A child runs past with a reed toy, her laugh quick and bird-like, and the elders smile faintly, the moment folding gently into the rhythm of the morning. Eventually, the group disperses, moving like drifting leaves down the paths that lead toward home, and you rise to begin your task for the day, repairing the roof of your cousin's storage hut, which sagged slightly after the last sandstorm. With rope slung over your shoulder and a bundle of dried palm fronds in your arms, you make your way to the western edge of the village, where the sun now sits directly ahead, warming your face and illuminating the tiniest ridges in the sand. The roof is low, and the work is slow. You and your cousin exchange very few words. He hands you twine. You bind it. He holds a frond in place. You lash it tight. Birds chatter quietly nearby, building nests in the eaves as if to mimic your motions. The heat builds, but it is not yet cruel. And when the task is done, you both sit in the shade, drinking from a cracked ceramic cup filled with water that tastes faintly of stone and age. You look out at the village, and it looks back without expectation. Each home and wall and path worn not just by use, but by the patience of generations. In the late afternoon, as the shadows lengthen and the day begins its soft retreat, you return home to find your mother kneading dough with her palms moving like waves, slow and constant. Your grandmother sits nearby, spinning thread, her eyes squinting into the distance, as if she's watching something no one else can see. You join them without words, sitting with your hands resting in your lap, simply present. As evening approaches, the lanterns are lit, one by one, their tiny flames glowing like memories, suspended in the soft gloom. You step outside after the meal, walking slowly down a path lined with stones set generations ago, now worn and barely visible, but still there, still guiding. The sky has turned to dusk's deep blue, and the stars arrive again, just as they always do, steadily, without surprise, as if summoned not by wonder, but by agreement. You lie on your back near the edge of the date grove, the scent of the trees earthy and sweet in the cooling air, and you listen to the creak of a nearby branch shifting gently in the night. Around you, nothing stirs loudly, and that is a kind of comfort. There are no clouds, no promise of rain, but you feel no frustration, only the understanding that this too is a part of life. The waiting is no longer something that weighs on the village. It has become the village itself. Every quiet hour, every shared glance, every meal prepared without rush, every story repeated for the 100th time. Each one is a drop in the great, unseen reservoir of patience that holds this place together. And so, your eyelids grow heavy once more, your body sinking into the earth's warmth, your thoughts drifting like sand over old stone, and you surrender peacefully to the quiet that follows all days here, slow, steady, and full of sleep. The 10th morning unfolds not with any remarkable sign or distant change, but with the same familiar breath of stillness that greets every dawn in this long waiting land, as if time itself has chosen to wear soft sandals so as not to disturb those who dwell beneath its gaze. You awaken to the dim, amber glow slipping gently across the floor, the light filtered through slits in the wooden shutter, shaped by the age of the sun, the dust in the air, and the hand that carved the opening generations ago. You sit up slowly, muscles still clinging to rest, and stretch your arms overhead, listening to the quiet stir of the village that has already begun its day, not with noise, but with movement, with action too gentle to interrupt sleep, but consistent enough to guide it away. Your feet touch the cool earth floor as you stand, wrapping your robe loosely around your shoulders, and make your way outside where the early breeze brushes your cheeks, warmer than before, but still gentle, like a whisper carried across miles of dry earth. In the courtyard, your sister is sifting flour through a cloth stretched over a wide clay bowl, her fingers moving with practiced patience, clouds of pale dust rising and falling with each toss. Across the way, a young man is mending a rope harness, threading fiber through worn loops, while his younger brother watches intently, mimicking each movement with invisible string. You pass them and offer a small nod, your greeting returned with a slow blink and half smile, and continue toward the animal pens where the goats are being let out, one by one, their hooves clicking softly over the stones, bells chiming faintly around their necks as they scatter to graze among the thorn bushes and dry shrubs. Today, you are assigned to assist at the dyeing station, a shaded clearing behind the palm grove, where bowls of crushed minerals, dried roots, and steeped flowers are stirred into water to make color for cloth. Though vibrant tones are rare in this village, the art of dyeing is preserved carefully, more out of pride and memory than necessity, and the pots are handled with reverence. You kneel beside your cousin, who is already crushing madder root against a stone slab, his palms stained with red and orange. The scent of fermented leaves and mineral earth fills the air, and you begin your work in silence, adding bundles of dried cloth to the steaming pot while stirring slowly with a long wooden stick, the fabric turning a deeper hue with each pass through the liquid. Hours pass in this quiet labor, the repetition becoming rhythm, and rhythm becoming meditation. You lose track of time until the shadow of the date palms begins to stretch, signaling that midday has slipped quietly into afternoon. A bowl of lentils and flatbread is passed your way, and you eat beside the fire, the warm grains grounding you in the present. As the sun lowers, you rinse the last dyed cloth and hang it to dry between the trees, the fabric swaying softly in the dry breeze like sails, waiting for wind that may never come. On your walk home, you notice a group of children gathered around a man who is drawing in the sand with a stick, telling an old story about a camel who could smell rain from 1,000 steps away. The children listen, eyes wide, knees dusty, their giggles breaking occasionally through the storyteller's slow voice, and you pause to watch for a moment, letting the sound fill you. When you return home, the evening is already settling in. The smell of barley porridge and roasted onions fills the room, and your mother hums a song that has no beginning or end. Its melody so old it could be mistaken for silence. You eat with your family, not hurried, not delayed, and afterward sit on the steps of the house, staring out at the horizon. A few others have gathered nearby, some preparing lamps, others simply sitting with their hands in their laps, eyes turned upward, and again you look to the sky, not expecting change, but acknowledging its presence, like one nods to an old friend passing on the road. The stars come slowly, first one, then three, then a cascade of tiny sparks, cold and silent above the warmth of the earth. You lie back against the packed ground, your head resting on folded cloth, and listen to the slow exhale of the village. Goats settling, fire sighing, doorways creaking softly closed. The night wraps around you gently, not like a blanket, but like a thought remembered, a dream retold so many times it becomes part of you. And as your eyes grow heavy and your breath slows to match the heartbeat of the desert itself, you surrender once more to the waiting, to the unbroken lullaby of dust and time, and sleep finds you there, quietly, like it always does. The village wakes again beneath a sky that looks the same as every day before, a ceiling of pale, wide emptiness stretching forever in all directions, unchanging, indifferent, and quietly magnificent. And though some eyes still glance upward each morning, no one speaks of rain anymore, not because they've stopped wanting it, but because they've learned that hope in this place must be carried quietly, like fire in a cupped hand. You stir from your mat slowly, blinking away the final shadows of sleep, and feel the faint coolness of morning clinging to the air before it's lifted away by the rising sun. There is no sound except the distant creak of a wooden door and the steady sweep of a broom against dry earth, and for a moment you lie still and simply breathe, long, even breaths that feel as old as the sand beneath you. Rising, you move through the narrow corridor of your home, ducking under the low wooden beam and stepping barefoot onto the courtyard stones, their surface cool and smooth from night's embrace. Your sister is already preparing the morning meal, grinding dried lentils into flour, her back straight, her eyes half focused, and your mother kneels nearby, sorting dried herbs into small piles for the healer's jars. They don't speak to you. They don't need to. Their hands move in time with the village, which itself moves in time with the sun. Today, your task is to help with the preparation of rope, thin but strong, made from date palm fibers, stripped, soaked, and twisted until they resemble something both delicate and durable. You walk past the central well, nodding to a boy, drawing water with slow, careful motions, and head toward the shaded grove where the rope makers have already begun. Sitting beneath the arched fronds, you take your place on the worn cloth laid over the sand and begin your work, fingers remembering the technique without conscious thought. Twist, pull, dampen, repeat. The fibers scratch lightly against your skin, leaving faint red lines. But no one complains. Work here isn't about comfort. It's about rhythm. It's about rhythm. And as you sit among the others, older women with lined faces and younger boys still fumbling through the motions, there is a deep, almost invisible peace that settles over the grove. The kind of peace that comes from many hands doing one thing slowly, together. Occasionally, someone hums, or a question is whispered, or a story is told in pieces between the pull of fibers. But mostly, there is silence, the good kind. When the bundles are finished and laid out to dry, you stretch your aching back and sip water from a shared skin pouch, its coolness surprising against the rising heat. The sun is high now, and the shadows beneath the palms have shrunk to slivers. You walk home through narrow lanes, stepping around chickens and quiet dogs, nodding at a cousin who carries firewood on his shoulder, sweat glistening along his brow. At home, lunch is served, a warm bowl of crushed chickpeas with oil and herbs, a few pieces of tough flatbread, and a date for sweetness. You eat slowly, your mouth moving in rhythm with the low conversation around you, each bite grounding you further into the comfort of repetition. Afterward, the village retreats into its shaded places, some to rest, others to work silently in corners where the sun doesn't reach. You spend your afternoon helping your father reline the bottom of a grain jar with layered leaves and ash, sealing it from the insects that sometimes find their way in. It's slow work, fragrant and dusty, and the kind of task that makes you feel useful in the softest way possible. As the light begins to shift and the village prepares once again for evening, the lamps are cleaned, the mats are shaken, and the goats are called back in with soft whistles and gentle tugs on rope. You walk to the outer wall where the breeze is strongest and sit beside your grandfather, who tells you again the tale of the year the sky turned violet and the trees budded without warning. You've heard it so many times that you can mouth the words silently as he speaks, but you don't stop him. Stories here aren't about newness, they're about remembering, about weaving time into something soft enough to lie down inside. As night wraps its arms around the day, you help light the small oil lamp beside the door, shielding the flame with your hand so it doesn't flicker out too soon. The stars return once more, quiet and dependable, their positions etched into your memory like the names of relatives. You lie down outside, your body relaxed, your breath matching the rhythm of a world that hasn't changed in the decades. The waiting no longer feels like delay. It feels like a way of being, like a practice, like prayer. And as your eyes close, your last thought isn't of clouds or storms or even rain, but of the simple, quiet act of doing again tomorrow what you've done today. And somehow, that promise brings more peace than anything else ever could. Another day unfolds in the slow, deliberate manner you've come to expect. Its opening moments soft and unremarkable, yet somehow perfect in their sameness, as though the village itself exhales at the first sign of dawn, releasing yesterday without regret and welcoming today without demand. You rise not with energy, but with steadiness, your eyes adjusting gradually to the light that slips across the floor like the fingers of an old friend. The air is dry and cool, the kind of coolness that lasts only a brief while before giving way to the sun's growing insistence. So you wrap your shawl over your shoulders and step outside. While the shadows are still long, the soundscape is familiar. A wooden ladle scraping gently inside a clay pot, the rhythmic brushing of a courtyard floor, the shuffle of sandals across sand. You pass your neighbor's house, where two young girls are drawing geometric patterns in the dust with bits of charcoal, their focus intense, their game wordless, and their joy quiet. You nod at them and head toward the eastern edge of the village, where the fields begin, though there are no crops to tend today. Only a routine inspection of the terraced slopes where your father believes the ground may one day hold water again. The walk is not short, but your feet know the way by feel. The sun rises as you go, casting a golden layer over the already faded browns and grays of the landscape. And by the time you reach the low stone wall that marks the border of the usable land, the warmth has begun to settle into your bones. You and your father walk the ridges in silence, pausing occasionally to bend and examine the earth, its hardness, its color, the way it crumbles in the palm. He doesn't expect change, but he checks anyway. Like a man knocking on a door he knows no one will open. You sit on a low rock and share a small parcel of bread and cheese, letting the stillness wrap around you, disturbed only by the occasional chirp of a desert bird or the distant bleat of a goat. Later, you return to the village with your father, stopping briefly to gather a few wild herbs growing in the shade of a stone outcrop. You walk home slower than before, not out of fatigue, but because the day seems to ask it, to be lived gently, carefully, as if too much speed might tear the fabric of its quiet. By midday, you are back at the house, where your mother is boiling water and your brother is shaping a clay pot with damp fingers, smoothing its sides with the back of his thumb. You wash your hands, then help prepare the midday meal. a stew of lentils, preserved lemon, and salted greens. The cooking fire crackles softly as the scent of spices fills the room, and you stir slowly, watching as the mixture thickens. You eat together with few words, sharing food and shade, and when the meal is done, the bowls are rinsed in a basin of reused water and stacked neatly for drying. The afternoon stretches long and uneventful. You help your uncle patch a section of fencing, brushing away the sand that's begun to pile at its base, and then spend some time shaping rope cords to tie down the corners of a tent in preparation for next month's gathering, even though no one knows if the gathering will actually take place this year. As the sun begins its descent, the light takes on that honey-colored softness that makes everything, walls, faces, dust, look briefly enchanted. You walk again to the edge of the village, this time alone, and sit beneath a short fig tree that offers more comfort than shade, its roots clutching the earth like a secret. You watch the goats return in the distance, led by two boys and a girl who chatter softly, nudging the animals gently with sticks. Behind them, the horizon stretches out like an old scroll, worn and empty. As night comes, the first stars twinkle in one by one, and the temperature dips just enough to remind you that you're alive. You walk home slowly and light the oil lamp outside your family's door, shielding the flicker from the wind. Inside, your grandmother hums a tune so low it could be mistaken for silence, and your sister begins weaving thin strands of dyed wool into a braid. You lie on your mat near the wall, arms crossed beneath your head, eyes fixed on the ceiling where the shadows move like smoke. There is no fear here, no rush, no clamor for more than what is already in hand, only the pulse of a life lived at the pace of the earth, a breath at a time, a task at a time, a night at a time. And as your eyes grow heavier, the only thing louder than your breath is the quiet itself, vast and gentle, wrapping around you like the wind once promised, the kind of wind that someday might carry rain, but tonight it simply carries you to sleep. The 13th morning comes with the same soft hush as every other, no rush of color, no dramatic winds, just the gentle brightening of the sky and the familiar feel of another day unfolding itself slowly. Like a rug unrolled across a quiet floor, you awaken with the rhythm of the house around you, the creak of the roof, beams warming under the early light, the faint brushing of your mother's robe as she walks past your sleeping place, and the dry sound of a wooden bowl being moved across the stone floor in preparation for the morning meal. There is no sense of urgency, no reason to move quickly, and so you sit up slowly, blink at the speckled ceiling, and stretch your arms toward the soft amber sky filtering through the narrow doorframe. When you step outside, the world greets you as it always does, with subtle motion and familiar stillness. The goats are already being led out by your cousin, who walks barefoot along the dusty path, guiding them with a crooked stick and a steady, unspoken rhythm. In the courtyard, your grandfather sits cross-legged in the shade, polishing the wooden handle of an old tool that hasn't been used in years, but still receives his attention as if it were new. You nod to him, and he lifts a hand in reply, his expression serene and distant. Today, your task is to assist at the kiln, an open pit behind the western ridge, where pots are baked in deep layers of sand and stone. The walk there is long and quiet, lined with brittle bushes and low-lying stones that crunch underfoot. As you walk, you hear only the wind moving faintly across the dry grasses, a sound so light it could be mistaken for your own breath. When you reach the pit, two others are already working, one tending to the fire, the other carefully removing the half-fired bowls from the edge. You join them, kneeling beside a fresh batch of pottery that has been shaped from the same clay pulled weeks ago from the now dry riverbed. Your job is simple, marking the bases of the pots with a small reed dipped in ash water, adding the family symbol so the items can be identified later during barter or gifting. The repetition is calming, your fingers steady, your mind somewhere between thought and silence. The heat builds as the sun climbs, and the smell of smoke, clay, and dust fills your nose until it becomes part of your breath, part of your breath. The hours pass slowly, and yet you barely notice they're passing. At midday, you share a meal of dried apricots, barley cakes, and warm water flavored with mint, eaten with your hands while sitting under the narrow shade of a cloth canopy. Conversation is sparse, and the silences between bites feel full rather than empty, as though the quiet is itself a kind of nourishment. After lunch, you assist in lifting finished pieces from the coals, placing them onto a straw mat to cool. The pottery is imperfect, wobbled at the edges, some flecked with soot, but no one minds. These are not goods for markets or kings. These are the tools of life, bowls to hold lentils, jars to store dried herbs, cups to carry the little water that remains. As the light softens and the shadows stretch long again, you help cover the kiln with a flat layer of stone and ash, then walk home through the same narrow path, your arms and tunic dusted with white powder, your hair smelling faintly of fire. Back in the village, the evening routines are beginning, smoke curling upward from small hearths, women rinsing vegetables in worn clay bowls, children herding straggling chickens into their crates. Your sister is plucking the strings of a small harp, the notes slow and uneven, but soothing, echoing across the courtyard like a lullaby whispered to the air itself. You wash your hands in a shallow basin, the water slightly warm and tinged with sand, then help slice dried figs for the evening meal. The food tonight is simple, a stew of chickpeas and onions, sprinkled with dried herbs and eaten slowly on flatbread warmed over coals. You sit cross-legged with your family, listening to the sounds of chewing, swallowing, and the occasional sigh. When the bowls are empty, you step outside again, barefoot this time, feeling the warmth still clinging to the ground. The stars have returned once more, steady as ever, and you find your favorite one, the one you've named after a long-lost ancestor, whose story you can no longer fully recall, but still whisper to yourself on nights like this. You lie down near the goat pen, where the air is thick with the scent of hay and dust, and let your body relax fully into the earth. Your mind drifts easily, carried not by thought but by rhythm of your breath, of the wind, of the waiting. The sky above remains cloudless, but your heart feels no bitterness, only familiarity, as if the dry heavens are part of you now, as constant and quiet as the land beneath your back. And in that slow, sacred stillness, Sleep comes, not as a curtain falling, but as a gentle weight pulling you deeper into peace. The 14th day rises like a breath held between sentences, quiet and uninterrupted, arriving not with grand light or sudden winds, but with a slow unveiling of pale blue above and warm gold below, casting the same familiar glow over the earth that you've seen 1,000 times before, and still somehow it feels welcome. You awaken before the others today, stirred not by sound, but by a sensation, something gentle and invisible that moves through your body like a low pulse. For a moment, you lie still and watch the shifting light as it softens the edges of the doorway, dancing slightly on the clay floor, where dust has settled in neat, forgotten corners. You rise slowly, your joints creaking with the weight of rest, and step outside to find the world cloaked in a beautiful sameness. Your neighbor's roofline still casting its long shadow onto the narrow lane, the faint smell of ashes from last night's fire still lingering in the air. The same dog curled under the same wagon, with his ears twitching toward imagined sounds. You begin your walk toward the herb garden, located near the ancient wall at the village's northern edge, where you've been asked to help clear stones and trim back overgrowth. The path takes you past quiet homes, their doors still shut against the lingering coolness, and past the well, where a small group of women gather each morning to draw water and share the day's first words. You greet them with a nod, your voice unnecessary in this hour, and continue onward through the narrow alleys lined with drying bundles of reeds, twisted cords, and woven baskets waiting to be sealed. The garden is not lush, not in the way a garden might be imagined elsewhere, but it is alive in its own subtle way. Clusters of thyme, wild mint, and bitter root plants cling to the soil here, nourished not by frequent watering, but by careful tending and ancestral knowledge of when to prune, when to harvest, and when to leave a thing untouched. You kneel in the dust and begin the work, pulling small weeds from between the herbs, brushing soil back into place, and stacking loose stones into small cairns that mark where future seedlings may go. Beside you, a woman hums softly as she trims a stalk of desert aloe, her movements calm and exacting, as if the plant has spoken and she's merely following its instructions. The sun climbs higher, and your shawl grows damp with sweat at the edges, but you keep working, lulled by the rhythm, by the warm breath of the wind that moves without sound across the garden surface. By midday, your fingers are caked in dust and your knees ache faintly, but there is no thought of stopping until the task feels naturally complete. A bowl of soaked dates and soft goat cheese is shared under the shade of a woven mat, and you sit there, surrounded by the scent of herbs and the quiet shuffle of those eating beside you, their faces calm, their thoughts hidden but untroubled. The walk back is slower, your sandals flapping lightly against the dry earth as you pass doorways, now open, revealing darkened rooms where others rest or work silently. At home, your father is sitting with a reed in one hand and a gourd in the other, scraping clean its inside to be used for water storage. And your younger brother is lying belly down, sketching symbols into the dust with a piece of coal. You join them, not to speak, but to sit nearby, to share space and sunlight and purpose. In the late afternoon, your mother prepares the evening meal with the help of your aunt. The two women, moving with the ease of a well-rehearsed dance, their gestures speaking more than their words. You're asked to fetch coriander from the storage pit, and you do so gladly, passing under the low beams of the kitchen, where the air is thick with the smell of dried spice and burnt wood. The food tonight is warm and filling, barley cooked until soft, with lentils and thin slices of salted radish, served with bread still warm from the fire. You eat it slowly, feeling each bite ground you deeper into the rhythm of this day, into the familiarity of a life shaped by repetition. As dusk falls, the sounds of the village soften further. The occasional thump of a closing door, the muted laugh of children finishing their play, the whisper of someone telling an old tale near the outer fence. You step outside once more and walk to your favorite spot near the garden wall, now cast in shadow, and sit beneath the low-hanging branch of a fig tree that hasn't borne fruit in 3 years. Still, it stands. Still, it offers shade. You lean against its trunk and look up at the sky, where the first stars are slowly being revealed, one by one, as if they've been waiting all day to remind you they've never left. The silence deepens, not with emptiness, but with presence, with the quiet certainty of a world that has chosen to move slowly, to exist in the long spaces between change. You close your eyes and breathe in the scent of herbs, of dust, of old stone warmed by sun, and as you lie down on the mat laid beside the wall, your body relaxing into the earth's steady heartbeat, you feel sleep rise like a tide, not fast, not strong, but sure. It takes you gently, carrying you once more into the comfort of another night under cloudless skies, where nothing ever rushes and everything simply continues. The 15th morning unfolds with the kind of quiet that makes you notice the smallest things. A soft shifting of sand against a doorway, the slow drip of water from a cracked jug left in shadow, the low hum of a fly circling lazily through a shaft of golden light, and you wake into it as though waking into a story you've been told before, one where nothing ever changes, and somehow that's the whole point. You sit up slowly, brushing grit from your robe, and watching as the light creeps up the wall, painting it in pale amber strokes, the same way it did yesterday, and likely will tomorrow. Outside, the world has already begun its gentle motion. Your sister is hunched over a basket of lentils, plucking tiny stones from the grain one by one, while your uncle sharpens a dull blade against the flat edge of a stone, his movements slow, even, and almost ceremonial. You are tasked today with helping at the salt flats, a half-day's walk to the south, where shallow basins of brine dry beneath the sun and leave behind crusts of white that are gathered, chipped, and bagged with gare. It is not a glamorous job, but here, no task is beneath anyone, only a rhythm to be respected. You set out with a small group just after first meal, walking with your head low against the growing heat, your sandals kicking up the fine, silty dust that clings to everything this time of year. The journey is long but quiet, the only sounds being the creak of leather straps, the shuffle of feet, and the distant cries of desert birds overhead. When you arrive, the flats shimmer in the light like a broken mirror laid across the earth. The others get to work quickly, and so do you, kneeling at the basin's edge and scraping at the brittle, salt crust with a wooden spatula, gathering what you can into small mounds before transferring it into a woven sack. The air here smells sharp and metallic, and the sun presses down like a heavy hand, but no one complains. This is a job passed down like a song, and everyone knows the verses. By midday, your tunic clings to your back, and your fingers are rimmed with fine white powder. But you stop only when one of the elders calls for rest, motioning toward a shaded cloth tied between two posts. There, you sit and eat from a shared pouch of dried figs and ground barley, sipping sour water from a goat skin and wiping your face with a square of damp cloth. The conversation is minimal. Just a few words about the yield, a quiet chuckle at an old memory, and then a return to the silence that seems to live in this place like a permanent resident. By the time the sacks are filled and the sun begins its descent, you are exhausted in the best kind of way, worn not by chaos or surprise, but by steady effort and the satisfaction of a task well tended. You walk home slowly, the sacks tied carefully to a handcart, and as the village comes into view, your heart softens at the sight of its familiar outlines. The low walls, the slanted rooftops, the curls of smoke rising from tiny fires. Children run past you on the final stretch, barefoot and laughing, holding sticks like spears and chasing shadows only they can see. When you arrive, your mother offers you a basin of warm water for washing, and the simple gesture feels as grounding as the meal that follows. A thin porridge with wild onions and a scattering of dried thyme, eaten with flatbread that cracks softly between your teeth. After the meal, your father invites you to sit with him near the olive tree, where he winds twine into a long coil for use in future repairs. You sit beside him in silence, watching his hands work, and only when the sky begins to darken do you speak. Just a few words about the flats, about the birds, about the heat. He nods, and you both fall quiet again. As the evening deepens, lanterns glow in doorways, and the sound of a flute rises from somewhere near the well, its notes slow and wandering, like a thought half remembered. You lie down on your mat just outside the house, where the earth still radiates a soft warmth from the day's sun. Above you, the stars appear, as they always do, familiar, unmoving, and far beyond the reach of any prayer for rain. And yet, you do not feel despair. You feel steady, like the stones lining the village paths, like the ropes that bind the gates, like the hands that pass bread in the dark. The waiting continues, not as a burden, but as a way of life. And as your eyes drift closed, you understand once again that in a world where the sky rarely changes, the soul must learn to find beauty in the unchanging. And with that thought folded gently into your chest, you drift into another night of calm, cradled by the hush of earth, air, and ancient patience. The 16th day dawns just as the others have, without any grand arrival or dramatic hue. No cloud-streaked skies, no sudden breezes, no sign from the heavens, only the gradual lighting of the world, as if someone slowly opened their palm over the village to release another handful of hours. You awaken with a sense of gentle inertia, your limbs reluctant to move at first, your thoughts still coated in sleep. The sounds that greet you are soft and familiar. The scrape of a broom dragging across the courtyard stones, the faint clang of a clay lid being lifted from a pot, and the whisper of fabric brushing over walls as someone passes your door. There's no rush, no bell to answer, just the pull of another day gently beginning. You rise and wash your hands at the basin, the water cold and clear from the pot your sister filled at dawn. After drying your face on a woven cloth, you step outside, barefoot, into the courtyard, where the sun has just begun to spill light across the edges of your family's rooftop. Today, you've been asked to help with the ink makers, an elderly couple who live near the edge of the village and are known for producing dyes and inks used in prayer texts, trade scripts, and the rare storytelling scroll. The walk to their house is unhurried, your feet stirring up dry sand along the path as the wind picks up faintly, carrying with it the soft scent of sage and the metallic tang of dry earth. When you arrive, the woman is already seated beneath a canvas awning, grinding charcoal into powder, using a flat stone, her hands blackened with soot. Her husband tends to small clay pots of dye heating over coals, their contents bubbling slowly, crushed walnut shells for brown, dried pomegranate peel for yellow, iron salts for black. You sit beside them, joining the rhythm of their work without needing instruction. She hands you a piece of palm bark to grind, and soon the rasp of wood against stone fills the air, merging with the quiet crackle of the fire. They speak little, only nodding occasionally, and the silence becomes its own kind of conversation, one built not from words, but from shared gestures and the comforting repetition of labor. Occasionally, a breeze lifts the edges of the awning and lets in a shaft of sunlight that briefly illuminates the swirls of dust in the air, making the entire scene look like a painting in motion. By midday, your arms ache slightly, and your fingers are stained deep brown and gray. But you feel a calm satisfaction settle over you. They give you a bowl of lentils, seasoned with vinegar and herbs, served on flatbread, warmed by the fire, and you eat slowly in the shade, watching as the ink pots cool and the dye seeps into sheets of folded cloth left to dry on nearby stones. The elder man pulls out an old parchment and dips a reed into the thick black ink, writing with deliberate care. You can't read the script. It's old, a style taught only to a few. But watching the lines form is like watching a river being carved into the land, permanent and purposeful. After the midday break, you help seal the jars and clean the tools, the water turning dark in the rinsing basins, the smell of ash and fermented bark clinging to your skin. When the sun begins to slide westward, you return home slowly, passing through the olive grove, where a few children play quietly, collecting fallen leaves to weave into crowns. At your doorstep, your brother has set up a line of stones and shells, arranging them by size and color, his brows furrowed with concentration. Your mother is pounding garlic and dried herbs for supper, the scent sharp and welcome after a long day. You wash your hands thoroughly, watching the ink swirl off your fingers into the basin like smoke vanishing into water. The evening meal is modest: barley mash with caramelized onions and dried olives. and you eat it with a stillness that matches the fading day, your thoughts wandering lazily. After dinner, your father tells a story you've heard before of the first trader who brought scrolls from the coast, wrapped in oilcloth and bound with a ribbon dyed the color of a stormy sky. He speaks slowly, not because he has forgotten the details, but because the pace is part of the story. Night thickens around you, and lamps are lit one by one. You lie down near the door, where the breeze moves most freely, and feel your muscles finally release the quiet tension of the day. You look up at the sky, still clear, still wide, and trace the constellations with your eyes, mouthing their names in the order your grandfather taught you. And then, as the sounds of the village sink into sleep, the creak of a shutter, the low murmur of a bedtime prayer, the shuffle of feet settling in, you drift gently into stillness, your body grounded, your mind weightless, and your soul held gently by the ancient hush that always waits beneath the sky. The 17th day begins with a veil of morning haze, not thick or wet, but just enough to soften the shapes of rooftops and trees, as if the world has decided to speak in whispers for a while. You wake slowly, eyes half-lidded, your body molded into the mat you've slept on every night since the last rains. Though no one remembers exactly when those were, you sit up and rub the sleep from your face, noting the silence that seems even gentler today, as if the village itself is pausing to listen to something you cannot yet hear. Through the open doorway, the sky glows a quiet silver, and the air smells faintly of ash and baked stone. The courtyard is empty when you step into it. The flat stones still cool beneath your feet, and even the birds seem less insistent this morning, their chirps fewer, their wings slower. Today, your aunt has asked for help in the weaving tent, a canvas shelter stretched between 4 wooden poles, where threads become cloth, slowly, rhythmically, with a kind of patient magic. The walk there is short, but your pace is slower than usual, your thoughts woolly with dreams that have yet to unravel. At the tent, your aunt is already at the loom, her back straight, her fingers pulling and knotting thread in practiced silence. Spools of dyed wool lie in baskets beside her, each color muted by sun and age. Dusty rose, faded ochre, quiet green, and the soft brown of goat hair left undyed. You sit opposite her on a low stool and begin winding thread onto bobbins, your fingers stiff at first, but finding their rhythm soon enough. She does not speak, not because there is nothing to say, but because this task does not require words. The loom clicks and hums softly as she works, a sound you've known your entire life, the same way you know the way light falls across the cloth as it grows longer inch by inch. Around midday, your uncle brings a bowl of warm milk sweetened with date syrup and places it between you. You both pause, drink silently, and return to the thread, the afternoon stretching around you like a piece of cloth itself, woven from hours and breath and patience. Outside, the air warms, but the tent remains shaded, and time slows even further. You lose track of how long you sit there, your fingers tying knots, your gaze occasionally drifting out past the edges of the tent where the village continues its quiet rituals. A boy chasing a goat through the alleyways, Two women comparing bundles of dried herbs. A group of elders napping in the long shadow of the central well. When the sun begins to lower, you help fold the finished cloth, soft, heavy, textured with the labor of many hands, and stack it carefully on a wooden shelf padded with straw. Your aunt thanks you with a glance, and you return home, your arms aching, in that pleasant, earned way that only honest work brings. At home, the smell of roasted garlic and cracked grain fills the air, and your sister is pressing flat dough into wide circles for baking. Her movements quick but calm. You join her for the final batch, spreading oil across the stones with a piece of cloth before placing the bread atop them, the heat rising in waves around your face. Dinner is shared outside tonight, the meal simple but hearty. Lentils with onion, slices of goat cheese, olives marinated in clay pots for weeks, and fresh bread wrapped in cloth. Afterward, your family gathers in a half circle near the doorway, and your grandfather speaks, not loudly, but with clarity, telling the story of a time when the village nearly gave up on the rain, and then, one morning, found the sky bruised with clouds and the sound of thunder echoing like a forgotten drum. You've heard it before, many times, but each telling brings new weight, not because of how the story changes, but because you have. The stars appear again, steadily, without surprise, and you step away from the group to sit near the fence, where the wind finds its way through a narrow gap in the wall. You lean back, the stones warm behind you, and close your eyes for a moment, listening to the hush that always falls between evening and night, the moment when the world exhales. There are no clouds still, and the air carries no scent of rain, but there is peace here, not from the sky, but from the land itself, from the people who have learned to make beauty from dryness, meaning from waiting, connection from repetition. And as you lie down, pulling your shawl lightly over your shoulder, the sounds of quiet conversation, crackling fire, and distant footsteps fold themselves around you like a lullaby worn smooth by use. You blink up at the stars one last time, whisper their names as if greeting old friends, and let the weight of the day press you gently into rest. Sleep comes like thread through a needle, slipping into the space between what was and what will be, steady, sure, and silent. The 18th day begins with a peculiar stillness, even more profound than usual. Not the quiet of nothingness, but the kind of hush that makes you pause before your first breath, as though the world is waiting for something, even if no one knows what. You awaken slowly, blinking at the pale ceiling above you, tracing the hairline cracks in the plaster that have always reminded you of dry riverbeds, curving, spreading, reaching nowhere. Outside, the first light spills lazily over the courtyard, stretching across the low walls, illuminating every dust mote in its path. And you rise without urgency, feet meeting the cool floor with the softness of ritual. A pot simmers near the fire pit, unattended yet perfectly balanced, filling the air with the subtle, sharp aroma of steeping herbs. You wrap your shawl loosely over your shoulders and step into the morning, where the shadows are still long and the village moves with the ease of breath taken through the nose, slow, deep, and meant only to sustain. Today is the day of small repairs, and you have been sent to assist the carpenter, whose lean frame and long fingers are nearly as old as the tools he carries, though his back remains remarkably straight. His workshop, tucked beneath a canvas canopy stretched between two palm trunks, is cluttered with wood shavings, dried twine, flattened reeds, and half-formed shapes, buckets, stool legs, and dowels, waiting to find their purpose. He greets you with a nod, and without speaking, you sit beside him to sand a pile of spoon handles he carved earlier that week. The wood is coarse, fragrant, and dry to the touch, and as you drag the stone along its grain again and again, a fine dust rises and settles into the folds of your robe. The carpenter hums as he works, low and slow, like a song without words, and the rhythm of it carries you through the task like a current. Time bends gently around you, measured not by bells or clocks, but by the shifting light and the creak of joints, as the carpenter stands, stretches, then resumes his labor. A boy passes by now, and then, delivering small bundles from house to house, figs, dried fish, folded notes, and each time he stops briefly, peeks inside, then runs off again without interrupting. Around midday, the carpenter pours you a drink from a gourd bottle, goat's milk mixed with crushed mint, and you sip it slowly, the coolness washing away the taste of dust from your tongue. You both sit in silence for a while, watching a lizard sun itself on a nearby stone, its body unmoving, except for the faint rise and fall of its breath. Later, you help bind a broken stool leg with soaked leather strips, wrapping the wood with slow, firm hands until it holds again. There is no rush. Nothing in this village ever is. When the work is done, you help sweep the shavings into a pile that will later be used to start the cooking fires. Then thank the old man with a respectful bow. He pats your shoulder, his eyes soft, and sends you home with a small wooden comb as thanks. As you walk back through the village, the sun is lower now, the air warmer, and the rhythm of life is beginning to lean into evening. Your cousin is heating oil in a shallow clay dish, dropping tiny pieces of flatbread into it to crisp, while your sister slices pickled lemons for the evening meal. The scent of roasted cumin and dried onion carries across the lane, mingling with the low voices of two women weaving beside the well, their laughter the only sharp sound in the soft landscape. You rinse your hands at the basin, the water surprisingly cool, and sit in the courtyard as the meal is passed around. Bowls of warm lentil stew, flatbread smeared with oil, and small slices of aged goat cheese crumbling at the edges. You eat slowly, with hands and eyes and memory, savoring every bite, not just for its taste, but for what it represents: effort, rhythm, continuation. After the meal, your uncle begins to sing, an old prayer turned lullaby, his voice cracked but steady, and you lean back against the wall, watching the last sliver of sun vanish behind the far ridge. The stars arrive again, familiar, expectant, and above you, the sky stretches wide, open, dry, and still deeply beautiful. You trace the constellations with your fingertip against the dark, recalling the stories tied to each. The hunter who waited forever for water, the bird who carried rain in its beak but dropped it before reaching land, the bowl that was never filled. These stories are more than myths. They are part of your muscles, your breath, your way of seeing the world. And as the village settles into sleep once more, you lie on your back, the wooden comb still tucked in your hand, your eyes slowly drifting closed beneath the same cloudless heavens. The weight continues, unchanged and untroubled, stretching across days like threads through cloth. And tonight, like every night, sleep takes you in without struggle, carrying you softly into the next waiting hour. The 19th day drapes itself over the village like an old robe, familiar in weight and color, worn soft by time, its folds settled comfortably into the same places they always do, with no need for tugging or fussing. You wake beneath the faint rustle of palm leaves, brushing one another in the early light, their soft friction like whispered greetings shared by old friends. The air is still, the kind that promises heat later, but offers a brief grace. In the hours before the sun fully claims the sky, you rise slowly, brushing the last grains of sand from your arms, and take a moment to sit on the mat, your hands resting on your knees, eyes half closed, simply breathing in the shape of another quiet beginning. There is no alarm, no signal, no call to action, just the gentle push of routine guiding you forward. Outside, a few chickens peck the ground lazily, their feathers fluffed and movements aimless. The neighbor's door is open, and you see your friend's mother lifting baskets of laundry onto a rope line, the fabric flapping slowly in the breeze, as if waving to no one in particular. Today, your task is to help prepare a batch of fermented date mash to be stored for the leaner months ahead. You make your way toward the communal storehouse near the back edge of the village, where the sun hits the buildings at a soft slant and the shade lingers just a little longer in the morning hours. When you arrive, the elder in charge of preservation nods to you, her face lined with years in sun, but her hands steady as she hands you a clay bowl filled with pitted dates, already darkened and sticky from sitting out overnight. You take a seat beside her on a low stool where the floor is layered in a straw to catch spills, and begin your work, mashing the fruit with a round stone, rhythmically pressing, folding, and turning the mixture until it becomes a thick, pulpy paste. The scent rises warmly into the air, sweet, sour, earthy, and the flies gather almost instantly, only to be swatted away with slow sweeps of your hand or a bundled cloth hanging nearby. The elder hums a song you half remember from childhood, something about rivers and fig trees, her voice low and melodic, blending into the day like background breath. Around you, others arrive to join in. Your cousin and his sister, a girl from 2 streets over, a grandmother with a crooked back but sharp eyes. No one speaks loudly. The soundscape is made of quiet scraping, the clink of jars being readied, the creak of storage lids being pried open. You work through the morning until your arms grow tired and your hands are sticky to the wrist, and only then is a break called. A jug of slightly sour milk is passed around, along with palm bread smeared with preserved olives and dusted with dried herbs. You eat with dusty fingers, wiping your face with the corner of your shawl and sharing glances with the others, an acknowledgement of effort and shared silence. After eating, you help fill wide-necked clay jars with the thick mash, sealing each one with a cloth and clay lid, pressing it down tightly so no air remains. The jars are then carried into the deep shade of the storage pit, their cool sanctuary beneath the earth, a place where sweetness will become sourness in the right measure, where time will do its slow magic. As you lift the last jar, your legs tremble faintly from the effort, and the elder touches your arm gently, a silent thanks. You leave the storehouse with the scent of dates still clinging to your hands and walk slowly back through the village where the pace of life continues without change. Children are crouched near the well, drawing figures in the dust with sticks. A man sharpens a scythe that hasn't been used in years, but still receives care, perhaps out of respect, perhaps out of habit. At home, your sister is darning a hole in a wool blanket, the needle moving with practiced ease, and your mother is kneading dough for flatbread, her elbows dusted in flour. You wash your hands with water poured from a tall jug and sit near the wall to help grind dried coriander pods, their aroma pungent and comforting as it rises in small, spicy clouds. The afternoon is warm now, but not unbearable, and you spend it resting beneath the eaves, eyes half closed, listening to the wind passing gently through the woven roof, carrying the faintest sounds of life from across the lanes. Someone singing, a goat complaining, the flap of a curtain pulled aside. Evening comes slowly, dragging long shadows across the stone paths, and the air begins to cool again. Supper is served outside, lentils and garlic stew, with soft bread and slices of preserved lemon, the flavors bright and strong after the day's quiet work. After the meal, you help fold blankets and extinguish lamps, your movements slow and grounded, your body humming with the rhythm of a day well lived. You lie on your mat, looking up into a sky that holds no clouds, no hints, only stars, distant, still, and dependable. You don't wish for rain tonight. You don't whisper to the heavens. You simply lie still, arms crossed over your chest, and let the deep hush of the village cover you like another layer of earth. Sleep comes as it always does, not with dreams, not with visions, but with the soft certainty that tomorrow will begin just the same. And somehow, that is enough. The 20th day begins with the subtle creak of old rope, a sound so faint you almost mistake it for the shifting of your own bones as you stretch beneath your shawl, still half wrapped in sleep. The early light is soft as always, diffused through dust that never seems to settle completely, giving the village its constant golden haze, like the world has been dipped in honey but never quite dried. You sit up slowly, rubbing your eyes with the back of your hand, and listen, not for anything specific, but to check the pulse of the morning. The sounds come gently, someone pouring water into a clay basin, the braying of a donkey somewhere on the far side of the grove, the light knocking of a cooking pot being moved into place over a fire. You stand, run your fingers through your hair, and pad across the courtyard to rinse your hands in the basin, the water chilly from a night spent resting in the shadow of the house wall. Today is a day of tending, not harvesting, not building, not preparing, just the quiet upkeep of things already made. Your grandmother asks you to accompany her to the grave markers on the eastern edge of the village, a task done every few weeks to brush sand from the stones, reset fallen markers, and murmur the names of those who passed before the last great drought. You take a shallow basket filled with palm frond brooms and scraps of cloth, and together you walk slowly through the village, past the same walls and windows, the same bundles of herbs drying from the rafters, the same gentle faces offering brief nods of acknowledgement. The graveyard is not somber here. It is simply part of life, another quiet edge of the world where waiting continues. When you arrive, you kneel beside the small stones, their inscriptions nearly faded, some nearly swallowed by sand, and begin your work. You brush gently, respectfully, removing dust and leaves, while your grandmother softly recites verses under her breath. There's no sorrow in her tone, only steadiness, as though the dead are not lost, just resting deeper than the living. A few others arrive as the sun climbs. An old man placing small pebbles on each marker, a woman repairing a wind-broken flag with practiced fingers, a child collecting dried seed pods fallen from the thorny acacia trees that ring the site. The sky above remains empty, the same pale blue dome that has watched over this land for generations. But its silence does not weigh on you. It feels familiar now, like the pause at the end of a sentence that no one hurries to finish. Around midday, you return home, your hands dry and dusty, your sandals filled with grit. Your sister hands you a cup of cool water, her fingers lingering briefly on your wrist, a silent thank you for going. Inside, your mother is boiling lentils and hanging washed robes to dry. The air smells like thyme and sun-warmed stone. You eat quietly with the others, seated in a loose circle on the floor, dipping bread into the thick stew. The only sound, the occasional scraping of bowls, or the low sigh of someone stretching tired shoulders. In the afternoon, you sit in the shade of the goat shed, whittling a new handle for the kitchen ladle, carving slow, shallow curls from a piece of desert wood that smells faintly of smoke and sap. The goats shift beside you, their hooves tapping gently as they doze or chew, the soft rhythm of their breath syncing with the sound of your carving. Later, your uncle joins you, settling beside the fire pit to mend a worn leather satchel, his hands moving with a quiet authority that comes from years of repetition. The sun tilts lower, and the air cools. Supper is smaller tonight, dates, olives, and a spiced mash of lentils and chickpea flour. But no one complains. Hunger is different here. It has patience. After the meal, the village gathers loosely near the well, where a traveling musician, only just arrived that morning with a mule and a bundle of string instruments, tunes a narrow-necked lute and begins to play. The notes are soft and wandering, meandering like the stories told by the old men when they forget the point but remember the rhythm. You sit on the ground with your back against the cool stone of the well, watching flames flicker in a few low clay lamps, the firelight painting everyone's faces in slow gold. No one speaks loudly. No one needs to. The music floats through, the air like fine ash, settling on the shoulders of all who listen. And when the night deepens and the stars return, in full, you walk back to your home, slowly, feeling the music still folded in your breath, your chest. You lie down with a sense of contentment that has nothing to do with change and everything to do with stillness. You don't wonder if it will rain tomorrow. You don't ask if it ever will. You simply rest as your ancestors did, and as your children might one day, under the same vast, cloudless sky, and let sleep gather around you like a familiar story, told one quiet night at a time. The 21st morning arrives not with change, but with the reassurance of sameness, the light slanting in at the same angle through the open doorway, the shadows lying in their familiar places like well-trained animals, and the first sounds of the village rising slowly like steam from a quiet cooking pot. You wake with your body already halfway to sitting, as if your muscles, shaped by habit, knew the time before your eyes did. The breeze coming through the window carries a faint trace of warm stone and dry bark, and beyond it, the air is filled with soft motion, bare feet padding across hard ground, a low voice murmuring a morning prayer, the occasional bray of a goat not yet fed. You step out into the courtyard to find the sky just as it has always been, cloudless, pale, watching. Your task today is simple. Join your uncle in maintaining the stone paths that wind through the village, the same worn tracks that have been walked for generations, smoothed by the soles of thousands of feet, moving without hurry. The sun is still low when you gather tools, a reed broom for sweeping, a basket for collecting fallen palm fronds, and a small clay trowel for repacking the soil between stones where it has worn away. You begin in silence, side by side, your uncle's motions practiced and patient, his steps careful, not to shift the stones, but to nestle them deeper into the earth. Together, you clear debris, brush off dust, reposition a loose slab here, gather a handful of scattered pebbles there. Every so often, he pauses to wipe his brow, and you do the same. Not rushed, not tired, just steady. The village paths are more than just walkways. They are lifelines, connecting home to home, well to hearth, field to storehouse, and caring for them is like caring for the veins of the village itself. As the morning deepens, the sun begins to warm the stone beneath your feet, and the scent of drying herbs, goat dung, and a simmering broth begins to drift through the air. From a nearby rooftop, two boys call out softly to each other as they attempt to hang a line of dates to dry, and the sound of their laughter, though muffled, echoes lightly through the alleyways. Around midday, your uncle signals a pause, and you both sit in the partial shade of a date palm, sharing a small meal packed in a cloth bundle, cold lentil cakes, a few wrinkled grapes, and a bit of hard cheese. You eat slowly, wiping your fingers on the edge of your tunic, watching as a lizard scurries between two stones and disappears. The wind picks up briefly and shifts the dust at the edge of the path, only to fall still again moments later. After eating, you walk the remaining routes, checking for cracks in the stone, tapping gently to listen for hollowness, sweeping away the powdery film that settles like a second skin over every surface. You return home just as the sun begins to slide westward, and you find your sister arranging bowls on a mat in the courtyard, preparing the table for the evening meal. You wash your hands at the basin, scrubbing slowly, letting the cool water trickle past your wrists and drip onto the ground. The afternoon passes in the soft haze of routine. You grind a handful of dried beans. Your mother stirs a thick stew with garlic and dried lemon. Your grandmother folds wool blankets along the shaded wall, her fingers shaking only slightly. The food is simple and good. Barley, lentils, salted cucumber, and a final bite of preserved fig. And after the meal, the neighbors drift into the courtyard, as they often do, bringing low voices and soft laughter with them. One of the elders begins to speak, not telling a new tale, but retelling an old one about a traveler who once wandered into the village. During a storm so far in the past, it now feels like myth. He speaks slowly, chewing over each phrase like something too precious to rush, and the group listens, not because they do not know the story, but because they know it too well to interrupt. As night descends, the air grows cooler, and a few lamps are lit, their flames barely flickering in the stillness. You lie back on a mat beside the doorway, your hands behind your head, your body relaxed in that special way only a full day of quiet labor can provide. The stars return, one by one as they always do, unbothered by the dryness below, unhurried by the prayers that never quite leave the lips of those watching. The waiting continues, but it no longer feels like longing, it feels like life, a slow, beautiful pattern without conclusion. And as your eyes close and your breath slows, you sink into that pattern fully, knowing that whatever comes tomorrow, dust or dew, silence or song, it will come gently, like every day before it, and you will meet it the only way you know how, with patience. The 22nd day arrives with a certain softness that you notice before your eyes even open, a difference so subtle it might be imagined, yet real enough to still your breath for a moment as you lie beneath your blanket, sensing the world around you begin again. The air is slightly cooler, just enough to pull the shawl higher over your chest. From outside comes the faint, rhythmic tap of a pestle striking stone, slow and steady, as your neighbor prepares the morning's flour in the same bowl her grandmother once used. A rooster calls twice and then falls silent. You rise, stretch, and feel the light press of fatigue in your shoulders. Not unpleasant, but earned. It's the kind of feeling that comes from living a life tied to land and sun and habit. After washing your face and sipping from the small jug of overnight water, you step out into the courtyard where your mother is kneeling by a basin, rinsing lentils that will be set to soak for the evening meal. She greets you with a glance and a brief smile before returning to her task, and you join her in silence, gently picking through the bowl for pebbles and spoiled grains. Today, your cousin has asked you to help in the olive grove on the southern slope where the trees are old and gnarled, their silvery green leaves trembling even in the faintest breeze. Though the olives have long since been harvested and stored in jars sealed with oil and wax, the grove still needs tending. Branches trimmed, weeds pulled, the earth raked smooth around the roots to prepare for another dry season. The walk there is long but familiar, past fields left fallow, and small rock cairns that mark footpaths and ancient boundaries. The sun is higher now, but not harsh, its heat delayed slightly, by thin winds that ruffle your robe and tug gently at the tips of your scarf. When you reach the grove, your cousin is already there with a short bladed knife and a clay flask of water, crouched beneath one of the older trees, slicing away a dead branch that crackles dryly with each cut. You greet each other with a quiet nod and then begin, working opposite sides of the same tree, sometimes passing tools, sometimes not, speaking for whole stretches of time. The air here smells of dust and sap, of warm leaves and dried roots, and the sound of metal brushing bark merges with the faint whistle of birds gliding overhead. A herd of goats bleats from a nearby hill, their voices distant and sleepy. Around midday, you both take refuge under the shade of a boulder, drinking from the flask and unwrapping a shared meal of hard cheese, pickled onions, and dried apricots. The salt and sweetness linger on your tongue as you chew slowly, grateful for the silence, for the taste, for the cool stone at your back. When the break ends, the work resumes, this time shifting to cleaning the irrigation furrows. Shallow trenches, long since dry, but kept clear just in case the rains ever return. It's not hopeful work, exactly, but respectful, a form of honoring a promise between the land and those who live upon it. By the time you return to the village, your arms are scratched and your robe dusted with dirt, but your steps are steady. The village, too, is steady, unchanged, enduring. A child runs past with a clay whistle clutched in his hand, the sound thin and high-pitched, bouncing between the homes like a bird unsure of its direction. Your aunt calls from her rooftop, motioning for her daughter to collect the drying linens before the sun fades. You reach your home and are greeted by the smell of stewed lentils and black cumin, the scent wrapping around you like a warm shawl. You help lay out the mats and bowls, smoothing the fabric as your sister ladles food with slow, practiced care. The meal is quiet, as always, with the occasional murmur of appreciation or small reminder about tomorrow's chores. Afterward, you walk out toward the well, stopping beneath the fig tree that hasn't borne fruit in your lifetime, but still grows, still shades. The stars begin to scatter across the sky above, and the familiar constellations blink patiently overhead, unchanged guides in a world that resists change. A neighbor approaches, carrying a cracked jug, and you take the rope together, lowering the bucket into the deep, cool dark, listening to the splash as it meets the still water far below. As you help hoist it back up, the two of you exchange no more than a few words, mostly about the steadiness of the rope, the smoothness of the pulley, but there is a quiet satisfaction in the shared motion, in the weight lifted together. When you return home, the lamps have been dimmed, and only the faint light of a dying ember flickers against the wall. You lie down near the open window, letting the breeze brush your cheek as you draw the blanket close. The waiting continues, soft, shapeless, and familiar. And once again, you let sleep rise to meet you like a tide that has no need for a shore, carrying you gently into another night beneath a sky that never rushes and never apologizes for its silence. The 23rd day emerges slowly, as if reluctant to interrupt the silence that still lingers between the rooftops and the sky, a silence that has become so familiar, so complete, that even the wind seems to move more gently, careful not to disturb the peace worn into every surface of the village. You wake as you always do, to no noise in particular, but with the faint sense that the sun is waiting for you outside, already climbing, already stretching its arms across the eastern edge of the world. You sit up, stretching stiff limbs beneath your robe, the cloth warm from where your body has pressed it into the mat overnight. The air tastes dry, flavored faintly by the dust that drifts in through open windows, and you breathe it in deeply, letting your shoulders fall back into the soft rhythm of another slow day. Outside, your mother is already at the fire pit, coaxing a small flame from dry wood shavings and goat dung pressed into discs. The smell is sharp but familiar, and she hums softly to herself as she places a clay pot over the fire, its contents still unknown to you, though the scent suggests barley and cumin. You greet her with a nod and gather the small pile of baskets that have been set aside near the door. Today, you'll accompany the other youths to the high ridge above the village to gather dry moss, thorny sticks, and lichen to be used in fire starting and lining sleeping mats. It's not a long walk, but it requires care. The ridge is rocky and uneven, the wind stronger there than it is below, and the sun more direct. You join the others at the edge of the settlement, 6 or 7 in total, including your cousin, who carries a woven satchel of dried fruit for the journey. And together, you set off, your steps quiet against the packed earth. The climb takes time, but no one rushes. Each stone, each outcrop, each shift in the path is familiar by now, and there's no need for chatter. The sun warms your back and shoulders, and you find yourself falling into sync with the pace of those around you, your breath steady, your gaze fixed forward. When you reach the top, the view is exactly as expected. Miles of open land, brush-dotted and dry, with the thin line of the village below looking no bigger than a scatter of pebbles. The sky above is vast and blank, a pale blue that shows no sign of softening, no promise of relief. But you've stopped looking for signs by now. You spread out across the ridge, crouching near boulders and tree stumps, carefully peeling lichen from the stones, gathering the twisted branches that the wind has broken loose, and pulling at dry moss with fingers that ache from sun and friction. There's a kind of quiet joy in the work. No one speaks, but glances and gestures are shared, and occasionally someone hums a tune too faint to carry far. Around midday, you sit in a crescent of shade cast by a leaning rock, eating from the satchel, dried apricot, a piece of salted bread, and a pinch of roasted chickpeas. The food is dry, but satisfying, and the moment of rest feels earned. On the way back down, the sun is harsher, and the wind is no longer playful. It pushes against your robe, fills your ears with soft roar, lifts bits of dust into your eyes, but still, you descend with care, holding your basket tightly, grateful for each step closer to home. When you arrive back in the village, the air feels heavier, more still than before, and the shadows are longer, stretching across the paths like fingers draped over familiar stone. You place your collection beside the storage hut and wash your hands at the communal basin, the water tepid but welcome as it slides over your skin, carrying dust and effort away. Inside, Your grandmother has begun shelling dried fava beans into a large ceramic bowl, and your sister is preparing dough, pressing it flat with a round stone before tossing it onto a hot metal plate set into the hearth. The scent of garlic and scorched flour fills the house, and you feel the calm that always comes with evening begin to settle over everything. The meal is served simply, a thick stew with lentils and beans, small pickled onions, and slices of warm flatbread folded and stacked like cloth. You eat with your family in familiar silence, the kind filled not with absence but with comfort, where the sound of chewing, the clink of clay bowls, and the occasional sigh of contentment carry more weight than words. Afterward, you step outside with your cousin, walking slowly toward the western edge of the village, where the stones still hold warmth from the sun. You sit on the low wall that overlooks the dry riverbed, saying nothing, simply watching the stars as they begin to appear. First a few, then many, then so many, it seems the sky is slowly stitching itself shut. There is no moon tonight, only the soft light of the stars and the occasional flicker of a lantern in the distance. The waiting continues, not impatiently, not hopefully, but faithfully, as though the very act of enduring has become sacred. You lie back on the stones, the rough surface pressing against your spine, your hands folded over your stomach, and you close your eyes to the sound of the breeze whispering between the empty branches of the old fig tree. And there, beneath a sky unchanged, in a world that never hurries, you allow yourself to drift, not away from the dryness, but deeper into it, letting sleep arrive like dust on the wind, slowly, silently, and without need for promise. The 24th day greets you with a familiar golden stillness, that quiet hour just before the sun fully takes hold of the sky, when the outlines of walls and trees are softened by long shadows, and the earth hasn't yet warmed beneath your feet. You wake, as though lifted gently from sleep rather than pulled from it, the mat beneath you warm from your own body's weight, the coarse fibers of the shawl bunched lightly around your ankles. As you sit up, you hear the faint murmur of voices in the distance, two women passing outside, carrying baskets of dried fruit toward the storage hut, their words low and rhythmic, not meant for conversation, but for continuity. You step out into the courtyard, where your mother is pouring water from one clay jug into another, straining it through a cloth held taut over the wide mouth of the vessel, her motions slow and careful, as if the act were sacred. A small bird hops along the ledge above her, pecking at a loose straw, then taking off in a burst of wings. You're sent today to assist at the dye pit, the shallow, stone-lined basin near the northern fence, where cloth is steeped in color, drawn from roots, flowers, and earth itself. The path there is dusty and dry, winding between clusters of homes and low brick walls where herbs hang drying in bundles, their stems brittle and fragrant in the light. When you arrive, two older women are already at work, one stirring a pot of marigold dye with a long wooden stick, the other wringing out strips of linen stained a deep, smoky brown. You kneel beside them without words and begin to fold the dry cloth into neat bundles, each stack warm and slightly stiff from the sun. The women speak now and then, soft comments about the weather, the the quality of this year's indigo root, the way the wind feels cooler today than yesterday. But mostly, there is silence, broken only by the splash of fabric being lowered into dye and the wet slap as it's pulled out again. Around midday, you pause to rest, sitting beneath a low fig tree, whose shadow falls perfectly across a smooth patch of earth. A bowl of lentils and sour milk is passed between the three of you, along with a pouch of cracked wheat sweetened with date syrup. The food is modest, and your hands are stained with color, but the meal tastes full and earned. After eating, the work continues. You carry baskets of wet cloth to a wide stone where they're laid out to dry, smoothing the wrinkles with your palms, the smell of dye and sun and earth rising in soft waves around you. Your arms ache from lifting, but you move without complaint. Later, you help mix a fresh batch of pigment, grinding dried pomegranate skins with salt and water into a thick paste, your fingers turning red at the tips. As the sun leans westward and the shadows grow long, the last cloths are hung between wooden posts, gently flapping in the breeze. You gather your things and begin the slow walk home, your robe flecked with drops of dye and your hands raw from rinsing and wringing. The village glows in the late light, walls lit with amber, doors casting long shadows across the path, smoke curling upward from the first evening fires. You pass a girl singing to a bundle of reeds as she weaves them into a basket, her voice light and unsure, a tune you don't recognize but find comforting anyway. At home, the meal is nearly ready, flatbread layered with spiced beans and roasted onions, served with pickled carrots, and cool slices of dried cucumber. Your father eats slowly, chewing thoughtfully, and your sister adds more wood to the cooking pit as your grandmother wraps leftover bread in a cloth to save for the morning. After dinner, the courtyard fills with that special kind of stillness that only comes once the sun is gone. The air cooler, the smells sharper, the walls darker, and the stars beginning to assert themselves overhead. You sit on the edge of the water basin, feet dangling into the cool space below, and stare up at the sky where familiar constellations blink patiently. Beside you, your brother softly counts stars as though they might change from one night to the next. Someone plays a flute far off, slow, hesitant notes that rise like smoke, then disappear. You lie back, the stones warm beneath your shoulder blades, your body tired but clean, your thoughts drifting like the slow turn of the sky above. There are still no clouds, no sign of rain, and yet no one complains, no one demands. The wait has become its own kind of shelter, an understanding passed from generation to generation that time, like water, moves even when you cannot see it. With your eyes fixed on the sky and your chest rising, with slow, steady breath, you feel sleep approaching again, not as an escape, but as a companion. It arrives without announcement, folding you gently into the hush of night, and you let it take you deeper and deeper into the dry and beautiful stillness of another dreamless desert night. The 25th day unfolds just as all the others. Before it, slowly, gently, with no need to declare its arrival, the early light stretches like lazy fingers across the rooftops and into the courtyards, brushing softly against clay walls that have been warmed and cooled by more sunrises than any living soul can count. You wake to the sound of a pot being set onto the hearth, the muted clang of ceramic on stone, softened by the sand-sweetened air. You lie still for a moment, your eyes tracing the shadows on the ceiling above, shadows of things unmoving, a beam, a hanging basket, the slatted window that lets light in thin, purposeful lines. Rising slowly, you fold your blanket, not because someone asked, but because that's what you do. The rhythm of life here is made not of orders, but of memory. Outside, your sister is already tending to the morning chores, gathering eggs from the hen coop, her footsteps soft and certain as she moves across the dusty yard. Your mother hands you a basket lined with cloth and gestures toward the eastern grove, where fallen branches from the tamarisk trees need collecting for kindling. The task is small, but no task here is unimportant. You sling the basket over your shoulder and begin your walk through the still sleepy lanes, past houses with doors ajar, rooftops where drying herbs flutter faintly, and a boy drawing a snake in the sand with a stick, his brow furrowed with concentration. The grove smells of old wood and warm dust. The tamarisks stand tall and unbothered, their roots buried deep, their branches lean but firm, grown used to scarcity. You pick your way through them, gathering what has fallen, twigs, dry leaves, the occasional curled feather left behind by a bird too small to name. A few goats watch you through the branches, chewing slowly, their eyes half-lidded, entirely content. The sun rises higher, and the light grows stronger, but not yet harsh, but not yet harsh. You fill the basket carefully, pressing each bundle in tightly, and begin the slow walk home, your shadow now short and soft at your feet. When you arrive, your grandmother is seated by the doorway, spinning thread between her fingers, the spindle turning with hypnotic steadiness. You place the basket beside the hearth and wash your hands in the basin, the water slightly warm from the sun. The midday meal is nearly ready, lentil mash with roasted garlic and vinegar, served with flatbread, warmed on a wide stone. You eat cross-legged in the courtyard, surrounded by the quiet sounds of the household, the flutter of linen in the wind, the click of your mother's bracelets as she kneads dough, the creak of a door swinging lazily on its hinges. After the meal, the heat settles over the village like a heavy blanket, and the world seems to exhale in unison. You lie on a woven mat in the shade, not asleep, but not fully awake either, somewhere in between, where time is soft and thoughts are slow. Later in the afternoon, you are asked to help mend a broken fence post near the goat pen. The wood is split near the base, and you brace it with stone and twine, securing it not because it's urgent, but because things here are held together, not by perfection, but by persistence. As evening approaches, the sky deepens into its familiar gradient, gold to orange to purple to night. Smoke curls from cooking fires across the village, and the sound of someone chopping herbs rises briefly before being swallowed by the hush of dusk. Supper is simple and grounding: a stew of chickpeas and onion, cooled yogurt with mint, and a cup of diluted date syrup to close the meal. You help tidy the bowls and sweep the corners of the room, the broom brushing softly across the floor like a whisper. Later, You walk out to the edge of the village, where the land opens into long stretches of nothing, dotted here and there with thorn bushes and low stones that catch the moonlight. You sit on a rock that's been there longer than memory, running your fingers over its surface as the stars come out above, first in clusters, then in waves. There's a small breeze now, just enough to move the hair on your arms, and it brings with it the scent of dry grass and distant firewood. You close your eyes for a moment, listening, not for anything in particular, but to everything. The shifting of animals in their pens, the rustle of someone adjusting a blanket nearby, the deep, unspoken quiet that lives in the spaces between footsteps. There is no rain, no storm, not even a cloud, and yet there is no disappointment. The absence has become its own companion. You return home and lie beneath the stars, your body heavy with the weight of the day, your heart light with the peace of repetition, and as your breath slows and the sky remains unchanged, sleep takes you once more, not as a departure, but as a continuation, a soft slide further into the rhythm of a world that moves slowly, waits patiently, and finds meaning in every still, dry moment. The 26th day begins with the deep orange of early sun painting one side of the courtyard wall, while the other remains dipped in shadow, a slow reveal of the day that feels less like a beginning and more like the turning of a page in a book with no final chapter. You awaken before the call of animals, before the murmur of neighbors, with only the steady rhythm of your own breath in your ears, your body wrapped in sleep's lingering heat. You sit up gradually, rubbing your palms together as if warming them for the task of living another quiet day. Outside, the world waits, not in expectation, but in stillness. The fig tree in the center of the courtyard stretches its limbs toward the sky like it has done for decades, offering no fruit but providing shade in the afternoons that come and go with equal softness. Today, you've been asked to assist with a rarely undertaken task, resealing the large water jars that line the cool, shaded corner of the storehouse. These jars, handmade generations ago, their bellies rounded and their necks worn smooth by time and touch, are coated inside with a mixture of beeswax, crushed lime, and sand, preserving the precious water drawn from the deep earth. Over the seasons, as they are emptied and refilled again and again, the lining wears thin and must be redone, not often, but always eventually. You walk to the storehouse slowly, passing through streets that are more pathways than roads, where children draw spirals in the dirt with reeds and dogs nap in the sun without the slightest concern. The air is warm already, thick with the scent of firewood and iron dust. When you arrive, two elders are preparing the wax mixture over a small fire, stirring it with flat wooden paddles. The scent sharp and sticky, mingled with ash and resin. You sit beside them on a rolled mat, and they instruct you without raising their voices, showing you how to heat the interior of the jar, just enough for the wax to cling, but not so much that the clay cracks. The work is slow, deliberate. Each jar takes time, and each motion must be careful. You hold your breath often, leaning in, pouring, swirling, then stepping back as the smoke curls upward in thin strands. All around you is quiet industry. Someone sorting dried beans nearby. Someone weaving a net for catching fish in the rare seasonal pools. Someone mending a child's sandal with goat leather and bone needle. These are not urgent labors, but necessary ones. Tasks that hold the day together like the seams of an old but trusted garment. By midday, you pause beneath the overhang of the storehouse, where shade offers its limited mercy. A bowl of cooled lentils and vinegar is passed around, along with slices of radish, and a jug of warm, slightly sweet water steeped with dry herbs. The meal is simple, but the sharing of it makes it whole. After eating, you return to the final jars, your hands now wax-stained and warm, your back sore, but comforted by the repetitive pace. The elders hum as they work, voices dry and steady, echoing through the clay jars in a strange and pleasant way, as though the pots themselves are holding on to the song. When the last jar is sealed, you help lift them into place, tucking them into the dark corners of the storehouse, where they will sit, unnoticed, for weeks, quiet guardians of the village's most precious reserve. On your way home, the light has shifted, the shadows of walls long and blue, and the heat less sharp. You pass a boy herding chickens with a strand of rope, the birds protesting with soft clucks and short flutters of dust-covered wings. A woman calls her child from a rooftop, her voice drifting like smoke, and somewhere far off, a pot clatters against stone. At home, your mother has set out bundles of dried mint and marjoram on a cloth to sort, and she nods as you enter, her eyes